as you can see by this piece of paper sticking out, that's where I bookmarked. I'm gonna get started. And if you like what you see, click on the subscribe button down below for more. Enjoy. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. The Wild Christmas Reindeer. Written and illustrated by Jen Brett. To Natalie and Stephanie Larson. Tika was excited and a little afraid. This year, Santa had asked her to get the reindeer ready to fly on Christmas Eve. Tika had never done this before, and she wanted everything to be perfect. Tika lived up in the Arctic in the shadow of Santa's winter farm. The last of the snow geese had flown south, and everyone's mind was on Christmas. The workshop was alive with the sounds of saws sawing, hammers hammering, and brushes painting as they all worked to have the toys and presents ready for delivery on Christmas Eve. Tika knew it was time for her to go in search of the reindeer. They had been out on the tundra, wild and free since last Christmas, and Tika was sure that they wouldn't want to go back to the winter farm to train. She would have to be strong and firm. At last, she found them, Bramble and Heather, Windswept and Lichen, Snowball, Crag, Twilight, and Tundra. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that one name, Lichen, right? Comment down below if you know the correct pronunciation. Tika took a deep breath and shouted out, "Let's go! Move, move, move!" The reindeer were bewildered by Tika's voice. Their heads went up to see who this loud creature was. But they let her herd them together and headed back toward Winter Farm. Tundra gave her the most trouble. Tika didn't know that he considered himself the leader and was not used to being bossed around. He liked to stay next to Twilight, but she was separated from him and running near the front. When they got to the barn, Tika put them in different stalls. Tundra snorted impatiently. By the next morning, when Tika went into the barn, all of the reindeer were restless and upset. Lichen was frightened of Crag, who kept nipping at him. Bramble was so worried she drove Heather wild, and Twilight kept calling out to Tundra, who was just plain angry and stomping his hooves. Tika groomed each reindeer. She wanted them to look sleek and glossy for Santa. One by one, she brushed and combed their coats and pushed and pulled their tangled manes. She brushed so long and hard that their ears started to turn pink. Tika took the reindeer outside. Now she was ready for the real training to begin. Snowflakes danced in the air as she tried to stand them in two lines and put on their harnesses. But they wouldn't stay lined up. She had put Tundra at the back with Heather instead of at the front with Twilight, so he kicked out at Heather, who then bolted into Bramble. Tika scolded the reindeer. "Don't move," she cried, but they ran off wild-eyed, and she had to go after them and bring them back. The next day, Tika harnessed the reindeer in the barn before taking them out into the snow. Everything went right until she got them lined up outside and tried to steer them first to the left, then to the right. To make the sleigh fly, they would need to pull together smoothly, but everything went wrong. Tundra crashed into Heather. Snowball blew up at Bramble. Windswept knocked over Twilight, and then Lichian, I think that's how that name is pronounced, Lichian, locked antlers with Craig. "Stop!" Tika cried as she watched the reindeer paw the air. "Unhook!" she shouted as they tried to free their long antlers. But Lichian and Craig fell over in the snow. The harder they pulled, the more their antlers locked. The reindeer were frantic, and Tika only made it worse by yelling at them. Tundra and Heather rushed to help, but the antlers did not break free. Windswept nudged at Lichian, and Bramble ran to help Craig, but the more they tried to help, the more they got tangled up themselves. Their necks strained and their muscles bulged, but their antlers did not budge. Tika wailed, "Oh, please, it's almost Christmas Eve." But the reindeer could not move. A frosty silence hung in the air. Tika looked at the tangled reindeer, once so bold and free, and began to cry. "It's all my fault," she said. "I spent all my time yelling at you instead of helping. I'm sorry." And one by one, she gave each reindeer a hug. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll go to work in a new way. No yelling, no screaming, and no bossing. I promise. Let me try to help you get free." The reindeer listened to this new voice. Heather's eyes sparkled. Craig cracked a reindeer grin. Bramble giggled and Snowball sighed. Tundra laughed and Twilight smiled. The more they laughed and the more they shook, and as they shook, their antlers rattled and rubbed. And before Tika could do anything, she heard a spring, spring, sprung sound. It was the antlers jiggling free. Quietly, Tika led the reindeer back to the barn. She sleeked their coats. She gently brushed their ears and combed out their manes. Tundra nuzzled her cheek. The next day, the reindeer lined up in 2 lines, ready for the harness, with Twilight and Tundra leading the line. They practiced turning left, they practiced turning right. Tika directed them softly. Tundra pulled for Twilight. Bramble was gentle to Lichian. Windswept helped Heather, and Snowball nestled against Craig. Together, they practiced long and hard. They didn't notice that it was getting dark, and they almost didn't hear a jingle in the distance. It was Santa, standing by the sleigh, piled high with presents, and ready to go. Now the reindeer were ready too, and Tika led them to the sleigh. Santa smiled and nodded his thanks. Then he climbed aboard and waved to Tika, who watched as the wild reindeer rose up together and carried the sleigh off into the night. The Hat by Jen Brett. For Sarah and Joshua Cardy. Winter was on the way. Lisa took out her woolen clothes out of the chest and carried them outside. She was hanging them up in the fresh air when a strong wind blew one of her stockings off the line. Curious Hedgie found it and poked his nose in. When he pulled it out, the stocking was stuck on his prickles. How embarrassing, Hedgie thought. The mother hen came by with her chicks. Cackle, cackle, she clucked and laughed. What's that on your head, Hedgie? Why, it's my new hat, he told her. Isn't it beautiful? The mother hen cocked her head as if she had an idea, and off she ran. Hedgie saw the nosy gander looking down at him. Honk, honk, ho, 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 the gander laughed. Look at that, the hedgehog has flipped his gizzard. Laugh today, gander, but tomorrow when it rains, my hat will keep me dry. The gander thought for a moment, and off he ran. The barn cat was watching from a tree as Hedgie tugged at the stocking. Meow, he called down. What a silly-looking hedgehog you are, with that thing on your head. But my ears will be warm in a snowstorm. Purred the cat, and off he ran. The farm dog and her puppies found Hedgie in a patch of brambles. Hedgie, is that a hat you're wearing? How funny you look, she barked, and her puppies yelped and giggled. But I'll be cozy and dry when it snows, Hedgie said. The farm dog's ears perked up, and off she ran. Oink, oink, the piglets squealed. What are you up to, Hedgie? The mama pig asked. Making sure my hat doesn't fall off if an icy wind blows up. I see, the mama pig said, and off she ran. Hedgie, what is that ridiculous thing on your head? The pony snorted at Hedgie. That was the last straw. It's my hat, of course. Don't you know that everyone should wear a hat in winter when it's cold and snowy? Hedgie shouted. The pony looked startled. Hedgie was usually so friendly, and off he ran. Hedgie just wanted to be alone. He was tired of everyone laughing at him. And with this thing on his head, he wouldn't even fit in his den. He didn't see Lisa running after him, the other stocking in her hand. "Come back, you silly hedgehog," she called. "Oh no," Hedgie thought, "even this girl is laughing at me." Lisa caught up and pulled her stocking off Hedgie's head. "You ridiculous little hedgehog," she laughed. "Don't you know that animals don't wear clothes?" Hedgie headed for his den, and Lisa started back toward the clothesline. That's when she saw all of her missing woolens. The animals had taken them, and each one was thinking, "Now I am wearing a magnificent hat." Lisa was still chasing them when Hedgie reached his den. How ridiculous they look. Don't they know that animals should never wear clothes? Christmas Trolls, written and illustrated by Jen Brett. To Ashley, Abby, Robbie, and Molly. I'm Treva, and the day my brother Sammy and I went to our neighbor's farm to pick out a Christmas tree was the beginning of the most unforgettable Christmas I ever had. As we went home through the forest with a perfect tree packed on the sleigh, Tuffy started sniffing and barking. I couldn't see anything, but I felt sure someone was watching us. When we arrived home, we forgot all about the forest. Mom and Dad had brought out our boxes of ornaments to decorate the tree. Sammy and I put evergreen wreaths, mistletoe, and holly all around the house. We had already wrapped our presents and hidden them away for Christmas morning. Then, some of our Christmas decorations started to disappear. I didn't notice it until Dad asked if we had moved the trinket box he had hidden from Mom. I shivered because Mom had just asked me the same thing about the mittens she had knitted for Dad. Sammy and I looked in all the usual hiding places, but we couldn't find them. Tuffy was acting strange too. He sniffed and barked and ran around in circles as if he were looking for something. The next few days before Christmas, the treetop angel was gone. What would be next? I started carrying my favorite red horse everywhere. Early the next morning, when I went to feed Arnie, I saw something flying across the snow. It was our Christmas pudding. I harnessed Arnie, bells and all, and raced after it into the forest. As I got closer, I could see that our pudding was being carried along, pin-cushioned on the top of a hedgehog. I didn't know what to do, so I yelled, "Stop! Come back!" But it didn't stop until it reached the bottom of the 4 fir trees. The hedgehog put the pudding down and scampered off. Just then, the trees started rocking back and forth. Suddenly, a funny-looking ladder dropped down from above, and 2 trolls scurried down, pouncing on the pudding before I could even move. They pulled it back and forth as they went up the ladder, squabbling all the way to the top. I climbed right up after them and looked inside. There on the floor of their troll house were all of our Christmas things in a heap. The trolls were grabbing at them, each one wanting what the other one had. "Hey, trolls," I called. "Those are our Christmas things." The trolls dove into the pile, clutching our gifts. "Mine," they clamored. "Mine, mine." I looked at them and had to smile. Their shirt tails were hanging out, their pants were torn and patched, their cheeks were bright red, and their hair was standing straight up from all the pulling and tugging at each other. "Christmas," they wailed. "We want Christmas." "You want Christmas?" I asked, puzzled. "Yes," they shouted. "Give us Christmas." "Well, you can't just take Christmas," I said. The trolls looked surprised. They squeaked, they gulped, they shuffled their feet. "Want Christmas," they said, sounding miserable. "Okay, you can have Christmas. But first, what are your names?" "Mig," said one. "Tig," said the other. I looked around their messy hut. "Mig, Tig, let's begin by getting your house ready for Christmas." I started to straighten up and put things away. They began to help. "Nice," I said when we had finished. "Now let's make your house look like Christmas." We went outside and gathered evergreens, berries, and pine cones. "Now we need a Christmas tree," I told them. "That's easy. You live in the trees, so you can have 4 trees instead of just 1 if you want to." "Christmas tree! Christmas trees!" they shouted, jumping up and down, and we decorated each one of the trees that held up the troll house. Mig and Tig had a small setback on the way back to the hut. I knew I had some more explaining to do. "When I first got here, you were snatching things for yourselves and acting really grumpy. Let's try playing together and having some fun." "Fun?" they asked. I showed them how to jump rope. I told them how much fun I liked their tail knots and earrings. They smiled shyly and started tucking in their shirt tails. "Nice hair, pretty belt," they said, grinning at me. And they taught me a little troll dance. They were catching on. Now, if you really want Christmas, you must be generous with each other. If you do that, you will have Christmas right here in your troll house. The trolls cocked their heads and squinted. They were trying hard to understand. "How?" they pleaded. I felt my red horse in my pocket. I knew I had to show them, so I took it out and gave it to them. "This is for you." The trolls squealed and jumped up and down with glee. They took turns passing my horse back and forth, happily playing with it together. It was time for me to go home. I slipped out quietly and climbed down to Arnie. To my surprise, their hedgehog had packed all of our presents on the sleigh for me to take home while we were having Christmas in the troll house. On Christmas morning, Sammy and I ran downstairs to find our tree alight with candles and our stockings filled. We opened our presents in front of the fire. But this Christmas was full of surprises. I heard a bumping and a scratching noise. Tuffy barked. I listened and followed the sounds. Outside on the doorstep was a Christmas present. I unwrapped it and found a wild and wonderful troll horse. "Taken Mig!" I exclaimed. When I held it, I knew for sure that the trolls understood Christmas, and I knew that this was the best Christmas ever. The night before Christmas. I'm sure that this is a story that you definitely want me to read to you during this holiday season. And of course, this poem, The Night Before Christmas, was by Clement Moore and illustrated by Jan Brett. For Gregory, Sophie, and Lee Sayers. I believe I'm saying that last name incorrectly, but I'm not sure. "'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled, all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief, and I in my cap, had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there rose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave a luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles his courses they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donder and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all, as dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they met with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So up to the housetop the courses they flew, with a sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then, in a twinkling, I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke had encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk. And laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh to give his team a whistle. And away they all flew, like the down on a thistle, but I heard him exclaim ere he drove out of sight. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.